I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from. The strange scent hit me like an invisible slap the moment Hannah placed the plate in front of me. It was my favorite dinner, chicken with mushroom sauce. But something was wrong. The sweet chemical odor wafting from the food made me frown. I looked at my daughter suspiciously as she forced a smile. "I made it especially for you, Mom," she said in a voice that was trying to be affectionate, but sounded hollow. Andrew, my son-in-law, sat beside me, completely oblivious to what was happening, scrolling through his phone as usual. With a subtle and calculated movement, I switched my plate with his. My heart was pounding, but I kept my face neutral. Had my own daughter just tried to poison me? The thought was so absurd that part of me wanted to laugh it off. But the look in Hannah's eyes, that nervous, expectant gaze, told me everything I needed to know. "This looks delicious. Hannah, you've always known how to make my favorite," I said, watching her reaction carefully. A flicker of anxiety crossed her face as she glanced at the switched plates. "Mom!" "Wait," she started, then stopped herself, her face paling. I took a small bite of Andrew's original portion, which seemed perfectly fine. Hannah's eyes widened with panic as Andrew began eating from what was supposed to be my plate. An hour later, Andrew collapsed, unconscious, onto the table. Hannah's screams echoed through the house. "Andrew, Andrew!" Her voice broke as she tried to wake him, but I already knew the truth. My own daughter had tried to poison me. My hands trembled as I watched the scene unfold before me. The man who had been eating my dinner lay motionless, his face pale, his lips slightly purple. Hannah shook him desperately, but her eyes didn't show the genuine surprise she should have felt. It was panic, but the panic of someone who knew exactly what had happened. The ambulance arrived 20 minutes later. The paramedics took Andrew away while Hannah followed, pretending to be the devastated wife. But I stayed in that kitchen, staring at the 2 empty plates, feeling my world fall apart. My daughter, the little girl I had raised with so much love after being widowed, had tried to kill me. And it had all started 3 days earlier when I refused her the $200,000 she had asked for to expand her business. I vividly remembered that Tuesday afternoon. Hannah had arrived at my house with a binder full of papers, charts, and financial projections. Her small clothing boutique was growing, she said, and she needed capital to open 2 more locations. "Mom, it's a safe investment. In 2 years, I'll double your money." She had insisted with that smile I had known since she was a child, but something in her eyes unsettled me. There was a desperation she was trying to hide behind her entrepreneurial enthusiasm. I had built my textile empire from scratch after my husband died 15 years ago. I knew how to recognize when someone was lying about numbers, when the accounts didn't add up, when there was more to a story. The documents Hannah showed me were too perfect, too optimistic. The sales projections looked like they were pulled from a dream, not from market reality. But more than that, there was something in the way Andrew watched her from the sofa, something in how they exchanged glances when they thought I wasn't looking. "Hannah, my love," I had said in the softest voice I could manage. "Business isn't done with emotions. These numbers don't convince me. I need more time to analyze them." Her face changed instantly. The smile vanished and was replaced by a cold expression I didn't recognize. "Time, Mom. I've been preparing this for months. You don't trust me." Her voice had risen a pitch, becoming sharper, more desperate. Andrew had stood up from the sofa with calculated movements. "Mrs. Miller, with all due respect, Hannah has worked very hard on this project. Perhaps we could consider at least a portion of the money as a show of family support." His voice sounded controlled, but there was something threatening in his words. It was the first time he had dared to contradict me directly in my own home. "Andrew, I appreciate your input," I said calmly, "but I need to make financial decisions based on solid evidence, not emotional appeals. This is a significant amount of money we're discussing." Hannah's face hardened. "You've always been like this, Mom, always questioning my decisions, never fully supporting me." "That's not fair, Hannah," I replied, feeling a sting from her words. "I've supported you throughout your life, but as someone who built a business from the ground up, I know that rushing into expansion without proper planning is risky. Fine, she snapped, gathering her papers hastily. We'll find the money elsewhere. Come on, Andrew? That night after they left, I stayed up late thinking about the conversation. Something didn't fit. Hannah had always been independent, proud of doing things for herself. Why now did she desperately need my money? Why was Andrew so involved in pressuring me as I sat in my study, looking through my reading glasses at the copies of the business plan they'd left behind? Red flags jumped out at me. The projected revenue growth of 300% in the first year was wildly unrealistic. The market analysis lacked any mention of competition or economic downturns. It was as if the document had been created in a fantasy world where everything would go perfectly. I decided to do a little investigating on my own. The next day, I called my trusted accountant, David, who managed all my investments. David, I need you to discreetly investigate the financial situation of Hannah's boutique, I said. Something doesn't smell right. David had been my right hand for years. He knew my instincts and never questioned my decisions. Mrs. Miller, I'll have news for you in 2 days. While I waited for the results of the investigation, I observed my daughter and Andrew more closely. They came to visit me every day, which was unusual for them. Hannah seemed more nervous each time, and Andrew was constantly on phone calls that he would end abruptly when I entered the room. There was a tension in the air you could cut with a knife. Their forced smiles and excessive attentiveness felt like watching actors in a poorly rehearsed play. Mom, have you thought more about our proposal? Hannah asked during their 3rd consecutive visit, her fingers nervously tapping on her teacup. I'm still reviewing it, dear, I responded, noticing how she exchanged a quick glance with Andrew. Business decisions take time. But we need an answer soon, Andrew interjected, checking his expensive watch. The properties we're looking at won't stay available forever. I nodded thoughtfully. Of course, I understand the time pressure, but rushing into a poor investment won't help anyone. The conversation felt strained, artificial. When they left that evening, I caught Andrew on his phone in the driveway, his voice raised as he said, We're working on it. I told you we'd have the money soon. The night before the special dinner, David called me with news that confirmed my worst suspicions. Mrs. Miller, I've completed my investigation, he said, his voice grave. Hannah's boutique is bankrupt. She has debts of over $300,000. My heart sank, but David wasn't finished. But there's something worse. Andrew has a gambling problem. He owes money to very dangerous people. I gripped the phone tighter. How dangerous? David, the kind of people who don't accept late payments. Mrs. Miller, I found evidence of threats made against both of them. They're in serious trouble. Is there anything else I should know? I asked, sensing he was holding something back. David hesitated. Yes, there is. I did some deeper digging into Andrew's background. He's not who he claims to be. What do you mean? His real name is Anthony Daniels. He changed it 5 years ago after being investigated for financial fraud in Arizona. He was never convicted, but there was substantial evidence against him. Shortly after the case was dismissed, he moved to our state and became Andrew Thompson. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. Does Hannah know this? I can't say for certain, David replied. But given how carefully he's hidden his past, I doubt it. There's more. He was previously married to a wealthy older woman who died in what was ruled an accident. He inherited everything. My mind was spinning. Thank you. David, you've been incredibly helpful. I hung up, my thoughts racing. My daughter was in serious trouble. Now sitting in that kitchen after they had taken an unconscious Andrew away, it all made sense. They didn't want the money to expand the business. They needed it to save their lives. And when I said no, they decided to take a desperate measure. My own daughter had tried to kill me to inherit my fortune. The love I had felt for her for 37 years transformed into a mixture of horror and betrayal that burned inside me. I couldn't stop the tears that filled my eyes as I sat alone in my kitchen, staring at the poisoned plates. I thought back to Hannah's childhood, her first steps, her graduation, her wedding. How had that sweet little girl turned into someone who could plot her mother's death? Had I missed something fundamental in raising her? Was this my failure as a parent? No. This had Andrew's fingerprints all over it. The man who had wormed his way into my daughter's life and changed her into someone I no longer recognized. The man who, I now knew, had a history of manipulating women for financial gain, but regardless of his influence, Hannah had made her own choices. She had prepared that poisoned meal with her own hands. She had served it to me with a smile. Hannah returned from the hospital 3 hours later. Her eyes were red and her makeup smeared. "Andrew is stable, but the doctors don't understand what happened," she said in a trembling voice. "They say it was some kind of poisoning." She sat across from me at the kitchen table in the very spot where it had all happened. Her hands shook as she tried to pour herself a glass of water. "Mom, I need you to tell me exactly what you cooked. The doctors need to know what ingredients you used." I looked her directly in the eye. "I didn't cook anything. Hannah, you prepared that special dinner for me, remember?" Her face visibly paled. "Yes, but I used your ingredients, your usual recipe." There was a growing desperation in her voice that confirmed my suspicions. "Why did you switch the plates? Mom, why did Andrew end up eating your portion?" I stood up slowly from the chair, feeling every one of my 70 years in my bones. Because the smell seemed strange to me. Honey, there was something in that food that shouldn't have been there. Hannah avoided my gaze, pretending to check her phone. "I don't know what you're talking about. Mom, you're upset because of what happened. Maybe you should rest." But I couldn't rest. I couldn't pretend I hadn't seen what I had seen. All my life, I had trusted my instincts, and now they were screaming at me that my own daughter had betrayed me in the cruelest way possible. "Hannah, look at me," I said in a firm voice. "Look me in the eye and tell me you didn't put anything strange in my food." She glanced up, but only for a second. "Of course not. Mom, how could you even think such a thing? I'm your daughter. I love you. I would never hurt you." Every word sounded hollow, like a poorly rehearsed script. I knew then that I would need more than my suspicions to confront the terrible truth. I would need evidence. That night, after Hannah left for the hospital to be with Andrew, I was alone in my house. The stillness was deafening. Every sound, every creak of the floorboards made me jump. I had lived in that house for 30 years, but for the first time, I felt like a stranger in my own home. I walked through the hallways I knew by heart, touching the family photographs that hung on the walls. Hannah as a little girl, smiling with no front teeth. Hannah at her graduation, hugging me with pride. Hannah at her wedding to Andrew, radiant in her ivory dress. When had everything started to change? When had my sweet little girl turned into someone capable of trying to poison her own mother? I remembered a day when Hannah was 6. She had fallen off her bike and scraped her knee badly. Instead of crying, she had looked at me with determination and said, "It's okay, Mommy. I'm strong like you." That moment had filled me with such pride. Where was that girl now? What had happened to her inner compass, her sense of right and wrong? I mentally reviewed the last few years. After Andrew came into our lives, Hannah had begun to change gradually. At first, it was small things. She would be late for our family dinners. She seemed more worried about money. She spoke less about her feelings and more about her business plans. Andrew had appeared in her life 5 years ago when she was 32. He was charming, well-dressed, always with a perfect smile and sweet words. But something about him had never quite sat right with me. There was a coldness behind his eyes that unsettled me. When I found out they had gotten married in secret without even inviting me to the ceremony, I knew something was wrong. "It was spontaneous, Mom," Hannah had said. "We decided to just do it, the two of us. But I knew my daughter had always dreamed of a big wedding with all the family present." The following months were filled with excuses. Andrew always had some new project, some promising investment that required money. Hannah stopped visiting as often, and when she did, she seemed nervous, as if she were fulfilling an obligation rather than enjoying our time together. Our conversations became superficial, filled with uncomfortable silences. I vividly recalled a conversation we'd had 6 months ago. Hannah had come for lunch, but had barely touched her food. "Mom, have you ever felt trapped in your own life?" she had asked suddenly. Her question had surprised me. "What do you mean, Honey, she had played with her fork, avoiding my gaze. Sometimes I feel like I have no control over anything, like someone else is making all the important decisions for me. At the time, I thought she was referring to the stress of her business, the normal pressures of adult life. But now, replaying that conversation, I realized she had been asking for help indirectly. Maybe Andrew was already pressuring her, already manipulating her to ask me for money. Maybe my daughter had been a victim before she became a perpetrator. But that didn't justify what she had tried to do. Trying to poison your own mother was a line that could not be crossed, no matter the circumstances. As I wandered through my house that night, I made a decision that would change everything. I couldn't stay silent. I couldn't pretend nothing had happened and go on with my life. The next day, Hannah arrived early in the morning. She looked haggard with deep dark circles under her eyes and disheveled hair. "Andrew is still in the hospital," she said without even greeting me. "The doctors say it was poisoning from toxic plants. They're investigating what he could have eaten." She stared at me, searching for a reaction. "Mom, I have to ask you something directly. Are there any plants in your garden that could be toxic?" Her question confirmed she was trying to find an alternative explanation, something to absolve her of responsibility. "Hannah, I don't have any toxic plants in my garden. I've been tending to the same flowers and herbs for decades. They've never poisoned anyone." My voice was colder than I intended, but I couldn't help it. "Then I don't understand what could have happened," she said, sitting down heavily on the sofa. "It's like someone put something in the food on purpose." Her words hung in the air between us like an unspoken accusation. We both knew the truth, but neither of us was ready to say it out loud yet. "Hannah, enough with the lies," I said in a voice I didn't recognize as my own. It was cold, firm, without the maternal love that had characterized every conversation with her for 37 years. "I know what you did. I know you put something in my food. I know you tried to poison me." The words shot out of my mouth like bullets, each one aimed directly at my daughter's heart. Her face transformed completely. The mask of concern fell away, revealing pure panic. "What are you talking about? Mom, you're crazy. You're making things up because you're upset." But her hands were trembling visibly, and she couldn't hold my gaze. "Why would I do something like that? You're my mother. I love you." I stood up from the sofa, feeling a strength I hadn't felt in years. "Because you desperately need money because Andrew has gambling debts, because your boutique is bankrupt, and you owe money to dangerous people." Every word I spoke made her face grow paler. "Yes, Hannah, I know everything. I did my research before giving you a final answer about the money." No, no," she stammered, shaking her head frantically. "You don't know what you're talking about. My finances are perfect. My business is growing." But her voice was breaking with every word. "Mom, please, you can't believe these things. Someone is filling your head with lies." "Who?" "Hannah. Who would be lying to me? My trusted accountant who has handled my investments for 15 years. The bank records that show your boutique hasn't turned a profit in 8 months. My voice rose, charged with the anger I had been holding back for days. Or maybe the private investigator who confirmed Andrew frequents illegal casinos and owes over $500,000. For a moment, silence filled the room. Then something unexpected happened. Hannah's shoulders slumped, and tears began streaming down her face. But these weren't the calculated tears of before. These were deep, painful sobs that shook her entire body. "Mom, I didn't want to hurt you," she whispered, her voice breaking. "You have to understand. He made me do it." A complex mixture of emotions flooded through me. Anger, heartbreak, and a sliver of something that felt dangerously like sympathy. "Made you, Hannah. You're a grown woman. Nobody can make you poison your mother." "You don't understand what he's like when he's angry," she said, her voice small like a child's. "When he found out you wouldn't give us the money, he changed. He became someone else. And this justifies trying to kill me." My voice was sharp with disbelief. Hannah looked up, her eyes red and swollen. For a brief moment, I saw a flash of genuine remorse in them. "No, nothing justifies that." Her voice was barely audible. "I've become someone I don't recognize anymore. But Mom, you have to believe me. He said if I didn't do it, he'd hurt both of us." Part of me wanted to comfort her, to take my child in my arms as I had done countless times throughout her life. But another part, the part that had seen the careful planning behind the poisoning, remained cold and vigilant. "What did you put in my food?" "Hannah," she hesitated, then whispered, "Oleander, ground oleander leaves?" The word hung in the air between us. Oleander, one of the most poisonous plants in existence. "Andrew got them. He said it would look like a natural heart attack." She looked down at her hands. "Mom, please, you have to understand. We had no other choice. They were going to kill us both." I sat down slowly, processing the magnitude of what I had just heard. My daughter had planned to kill me with oleander, one of the most toxic plants in existence. "And then what? Hannah, after you killed me, what was supposed to happen?" My voice was strangely calm, as if I were discussing the weather and not my own planned murder. "We were going to inherit everything," she said, avoiding my eyes. "The house, the company, the investments. It was enough to pay off the debts and start over." She paused, as if realizing how monstrous her words sounded. "But Mom, I swear I didn't want to do it. Andrew pressured me. He said it was the only way to save us." "Andrew pressured you," I repeated, feeling rage build in my chest. "Hannah, you are a grown woman. No one can pressure you into murdering your own mother." I stood up abruptly, walking to the window to put distance between us. "Do you know what this means? Do you know what you've just confessed?" Hannah stood up too, approaching me with hesitant steps. "Mom, please, you can't tell anyone. If you call the police, Andrew and I will go to jail. And those dangerous people, they'll still be after us." Her hands reached for my arm, but I pulled away sharply. "Please, we can find another solution. Lend me the money, and we'll go far away. You'll never have to see us again." "Lend you the money?" My voice rose several octaves. "After you tried to kill me, after you planned my death as if it were a business transaction." I spun around to face her directly. "Hannah, are you hearing yourself? Do you hear how absurd your request is?" "Mom, I'm your daughter," she said, her voice breaking. "I'm the only thing you have in this world. If you turn me over to the police, you'll be completely alone." Her words were a mix of pleading and emotional threat. "Do you really want that? Do you want to spend your last years with no family, knowing you destroyed your own daughter's life?" Her emotional blackmail wounded me deeply, but it also filled me with a clarity I hadn't felt in days. "Hannah, you destroyed our relationship the moment you decided to poison me. I am not responsible for the consequences of your actions." I walked to the front door, pulling it wide open. "I want you out of my house. Now." "What are you going to do?" she asked, panic evident in her voice. "Are you going to call the police? Are you going to destroy your own family for revenge?" She moved toward the door, but stopped before leaving. "Mom, think carefully. Once you make that decision, there's no going back. You'll lose us forever." "I already lost you," I replied with a sadness that cut me to the bone. "I lost you the moment you decided my death was an acceptable solution to your problems." I pointed outside. "Leave, Hannah. Leave before I do something we'll both regret." She stood on the threshold for a moment that felt like an eternity. "Mom, if you do this, you'll be signing my death warrant. Those people don't forgive. Without the money, Andrew and I will have nowhere to hide." Her final plea had a desperate tone that almost broke my resolve. "You should have thought of that before you tried to murder me," I said, slowly closing the door. "You should have thought of the consequences before you decided my life was worth less than your debts." The sound of the door closing echoed through the house like the end of an era. I stood in the foyer, listening to Hannah's footsteps hurrying away down the path. My legs trembled and I had to lean against the wall to keep from falling. I had thrown my own daughter out of my house after discovering she had tried to kill me. The reality of the situation hit me like an emotional avalanche. As I slid down to the floor, my back against the wall, I felt utterly alone. The enormity of Hannah's betrayal crashed over me in waves, each one threatening to pull me under. But beneath the hurt and betrayal, something else was stirring, a resolve I hadn't felt in years. I couldn't face this alone. I needed someone who would understand, someone who could help me navigate the impossible decision before me. I ran out of my house like a fugitive with no destination in mind, my heart pounding so hard I thought it would burst from my chest. My 70-year-old legs automatically carried me to Judith's house, my neighbor of 15 years. She was the only person in the world who could understand what I had just been through without judging me as an old woman who had lost her mind. I knocked on her door with desperate pounds, not caring that it was 11 huzzers at night. "Judith, please open up. It's Karen. I need help." My voice was breaking between sobs I had been holding back for hours. When she finally opened the door, dressed in her blue robe with her silver hair loose around her shoulders, her expression immediately shifted from surprise to motherly concern. "Karen, what happened? Dear," she asked, pulling the door open wide. "You're trembling. Come in right now." Her warm hands guided me to her living room, where she sat me on her comfortable sofa while she prepared chamomile tea with quick, efficient movements. "Judith, you're not going to believe what just happened to me," I said, accepting the steaming mug in my trembling hands. "My own daughter tried to poison me. Hannah wanted to kill me for money." The words poured out like a flood I had been holding back for days. And when I confronted her, she confessed everything. She told me they put oleander in my food. Judith sat across from me, taking my hands in hers, her hazel eyes filled with genuine horror. "What are you saying? Karen Hannah tried to poison you." Her voice was barely a whisper, as if speaking louder would make the situation even more real. "Tell me everything from the beginning. Don't skip a single detail." Over the next hour, I recounted everything. The request for money, my suspicions, the special dinner, the plate swap, Andrew collapsing, Hannah's confession. Judith listened in silence, nodding occasionally, her expression growing graver with every word I spoke. "Karen, this is much more serious than you think," she said finally, getting up to pace the room. "If Hannah was capable of trying to poison you once, she could try again. Now that she knows you know the truth, you're a danger to her." She stopped in front of me, her arms crossed. "You can't go back to your house alone. It's too dangerous." "But what am I going to do?" "Judith," I asked, feeling the weight of the situation crushing me. "She's my daughter, in spite of everything. She's still my daughter. I can't just turn her over to the police." My tears fell into the teacup, mixing with the warm liquid. All my life, I loved her, protected her, cared for her. How could it come to this? Judith sat beside me, wrapping her arms around me in a hug I hadn't received in years. "Honey, listen to me carefully. A mother's love doesn't mean you have to let them kill you. Hannah made a terrible choice, and now she has to face the consequences." Her voice was firm but warm. "You didn't turn her into a murderer. She chose that path." "But I'm so alone, Judith," I sobbed against her shoulder. "Hannah is all the family I have left. If I report her, I'll be completely alone in this world." The reality of my situation hit me like an avalanche. I had no one else. No other children. No siblings. My parents died decades ago. "You're not alone," she said with a determination that surprised me. "You have me, and we are going to get through this together." She pulled away to look me directly in the eyes. "Karen, for 15 years, you've been more than a neighbor to me. You're the sister of my heart, and I am not going to let your own daughter hurt you." Her words touched me deeply. For all these years, I had been so focused on my relationship with Hannah that I hadn't realized I had someone else who truly cared about me. But what can we do? I don't have concrete proof. I only have her confession, and she could deny everything. "We have to be smart," she said, getting up to grab a notebook and a pen. "First, we need to document everything that happened, every detail, every conversation, every piece of evidence we have." She started writing as she spoke. "Second, we need to protect you. You cannot be alone until we sort this out." "Do you really think she would try to hurt me again?" I asked, though deep down, I already knew the answer. I mean, she knows that I know everything. It would be too obvious if something happened to me now. Judith looked at me with a seriousness that chilled me to the bone. Karen, when someone crosses the line of trying to kill their own mother, we can no longer predict what else they are capable of. Hannah is desperate, and desperate people make irrational decisions. She closed the notebook and sat across from me. Besides, from what you told me, she owes money to dangerous people. If she can't get your money the easy way, she might try to get it the hard way. The night passed slowly. Judith insisted I sleep at her house, and for the first time in days, I felt safe. But sleep didn't come easily. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw Hannah's face confessing she had tried to poison me. I saw the fake smile as she served me that special dinner. I saw years of manipulation I had ignored out of motherly love. At 600 in the morning, Judith was already up making breakfast. "You got some sleep, but not enough," she said, serving me black coffee and toast. "Today we have to make some important decisions. We can't let ourselves be paralyzed by fear or guilt." "What do you propose?" I asked, grateful for the normality of a morning routine after the nightmare of the previous night. Because honestly, I don't even know where to begin. I never thought I'd be in a situation like this. "First, we're going to go to your house together so you can pack some things," she said, sitting across from me with her own cup of coffee. "But we are going to be very careful. If we see any sign that Hannah or Andrew are nearby, we leave immediately." She took a sip of coffee before continuing. "Second, we need to talk to someone who can help us legally, a lawyer, maybe the police." "But what if Claire was telling the truth about the dangerous people?" I asked, feeling fear wash over me again. "What if by reporting her, we're really sentencing her to death?" The maternal guilt I had carried my whole life intensified. Judith reached her hand across the table and took mine. "Karen, listen to me very carefully. Hannah and Andrew created this situation. You are not responsible for the consequences of their choices. Your job as a mother does not include allowing them to murder you to save your daughter from her own mistakes." Her words hit home with painful clarity. I had spent my entire life putting Hannah's needs before my own. But this was different. This was survival. "You're right," I said finally. "But I need legal advice before I go to the police. I need to know what I'm getting into." Judith nodded. "I have a friend, Marcus Johnson. He's a criminal attorney with decades of experience. I'll call him right away." While Judith made the call, I found myself drawn to a bookshelf in her living room. There, among family photos, was a picture of Judith, Hannah, and me at Hannah's 30th birthday party. We were all smiling, our arms around each other. It was only 5 years ago, but it felt like a lifetime. I picked up the frame, studying Hannah's face. What had happened to that woman in the photo? Where did she go? And how had I missed the warning signs of her transformation? Judith returned to find me still holding the photo, tears streaming down my face. "Marcus will see us at 2:00 p.m. today," she said softly. "He says it's best if we bring any evidence we have." I nodded, replacing the frame on the shelf. "Then we need to go to my house. I need to look for anything that might prove what Hannah did." "Are you sure you're ready for that?" Judith asked, concern evident in her voice. "No," I admitted, "but I don't have a choice." Before returning to my house, I had a sudden thought. "Judith, do you still have that old cardboard box I asked you to keep for me last year?" She looked surprised. "Yes, it's in my garage." "Why?" "I need to check something." The box contained old journals and keepsakes I had saved from Hannah's childhood and adolescence. I had stored them at Judith's during my kitchen renovation and never brought them back. As we dug through the contents, I found what I was looking for: Hannah's diary from her teenage years. I never read her private thoughts, I explained to Judith. I respected her privacy. But now things are different, Judith finished for me. This might help us understand how she became capable of such a thing. I opened the journal with trembling hands. The entries started when Hannah was 15, filled with typical teenage concerns: school, friends, her first crush. But as I flipped through the pages, a pattern emerged. Hannah had always struggled with insecurity, with a desperate need to be accepted and loved. She often wrote about feeling like she wasn't good enough, about doing anything to please the people she cared about. One entry in particular caught my attention. Mom works so hard for us. Sometimes I feel like I'll never live up to her expectations. She built this whole company from nothing after Dad died. How can I ever be that strong? I just want her to be proud of me. I'd do anything to make her proud. The words stabbed at my heart. Had I put too much pressure on her? Had my success somehow twisted her sense of self-worth? This doesn't excuse what she did, Judith said, reading over my shoulder. But it might help explain why Andrew was able to manipulate her. People with deep insecurities are vulnerable to those who know how to exploit them. I closed the diary, feeling a complex mixture of guilt and resolve. Let's go to my house. I need to know the full truth. We returned to my house at 10 hours in the morning, with Judith walking beside me like a protective bodyguard. Her steps were decisive, and her eyes constantly scanned the surroundings for any sign of danger. If we see Andrew's car or anything suspicious, we leave immediately. She reminded me for the third time as we walked up the path to my front door. The house felt different when we entered. It wasn't just my imagination. There was a heavy atmosphere, as if the walls themselves had absorbed the betrayal of the previous night. Judith walked straight to the kitchen while I stood frozen in the foyer, paralyzed by the memories of everything that had happened in these rooms. "Karen, get in here right now," Judith yelled from the kitchen. Her voice had an urgency that made me run towards her. "Look at this. Look what I found." She was standing in front of the sink, holding something in her hands with a kitchen towel. It was a small glass jar, the kind used for spices, but it was labeled with handwriting I recognized immediately. It was Hannah's calligraphy. "Ground oleander," the label read. Judith held it carefully, avoiding direct contact. "I found it hidden behind the other spices. Your daughter left the evidence right here." My heart stopped completely. Seeing the physical proof of what Hannah had done made everything feel even more real, more devastating. "She really did it," I murmured, feeling my legs turn to jelly. "She really brought poison into my house and put it in my food." "There's more," Judith said, opening the cabinet systematically. "Look, here are used latex gloves in the trash, and this cloth has green residue on it, probably from the leaves she ground up." Every piece of evidence she found was like another stab to my heart. "Karen, this wasn't a spur-of-the-moment impulse. This was planned, calculated, premeditated." Judith started taking pictures of everything with her cell phone. "We need to document every piece of evidence before someone comes to destroy it," she explained as she photographed the jar from different angles. "If Hannah realizes she left these things here, she's going to come back to clean up her tracks." "What else could there be?" I asked, feeling a mix of horror and morbid curiosity. What else could we find that shows us just how far they planned this? I started checking my own cabinets, looking for anything out of place. "Let's check her room," Judith suggested. "The room where she stayed when she came to visit. Maybe she left something there, too." We went upstairs to the second floor where Hannah had spent so many nights during her childhood and youth. The room was still decorated just as she had left it when she moved in with Andrew. As I opened the door, memories flooded back. Hannah at 5 years old, insisting on reading just one more story before bed. Hannah at 12, decorating the walls with posters of her favorite bands. Hannah at 17, crying after her first heartbreak, seeking comfort in my arms. The room felt like a time capsule, preserved in amber, of the daughter I thought I knew, the daughter who was now a stranger. Judith went straight to the desk, checking drawers and papers. "There's something here," she said, pulling out a sheet of paper that was folded under a book. "It's a handwritten list." She unfolded the paper and began to read aloud. "Oleander, get fresh leaves, gloves, mortar and pestle to crush, opportunity special dinner, call ambulance after 30 minutes. The list was written in Hannah's clear, neat handwriting, the same handwriting I had seen on thousands of loving notes she wrote to me as a child. Seeing those words written in her own hand made reality hit me like an emotional tsunami. "It's a to-do list for my murder," I said, my voice breaking. "My daughter made a list of instructions to kill me." "There's more," Judith continued, checking the rest of the paper. "It says here, check will specifics. Approximate liquid inheritance, 2.8 million. Andrew's debts, 500,000. Enough left over for a new life." "Karen, They calculated exactly how much money they would get from your death. I sat heavily on the bed where Hannah had slept as a child. The same pink bed sheets she had chosen when she was 12 were still there, washed and ironed, waiting for her next visit. How could I have been so blind? I wondered aloud. How did I not see that my own daughter had turned into this? Judith sat next to me, taking my hands in hers. Because you're a mother who loves her daughter, because you trusted her, as you should. You did nothing wrong. Karen. She chose this path. Her words were comforting, but they couldn't erase the guilt that was eating away at my soul. Let's keep looking, she said softly. The more evidence we have, the stronger we'll be when we decide what to do. We continued to search the room methodically. In the closet behind old shoe boxes, Judith found something that made our blood run cold. Karen, come see this, she called, her voice trembling. In her hands, she held a manila envelope full of documents. These are copies of your will, bank statements, insurance policies. She sorted through the papers one by one. Here are handwritten calculations on how long it would take to liquidate your investments after your death. The envelope also contained something that broke me completely, a letter I had never seen, addressed to me, dated 3 weeks ago. Dear Mom, the letter began in Hannah's handwriting. If you are reading this, it means something went wrong with our plan. I want you to know that I never wanted to hurt you, but we had no other choice. Andrew and I are in real danger, and your death was the only way to get the money quickly. Judith continued reading the letter aloud. Please forgive me. I know it's terrible, but I hoped it would be quick and that you wouldn't suffer. The oleander we are going to use will cause a heart attack that will seem natural. The doctors will think it was age and stress. They will never know it was intentional. The letter went on with specific details about how they planned to dispose of the evidence, how they would act like a grieving daughter during the funeral, and how they would distribute the money once they received the inheritance. After paying off Andrew's debts, we plan to move to another country where we can start over, maybe Costa Rica or Panama where our money will go further. It's a complete manual on how to murder your mother and get away with it, Judith said, disgust evident in her voice. Karen, this proves it wasn't a desperate, last-minute decision. They've been planning this for weeks. She folded the letter carefully and put it back in the envelope. We also found a second sheet with detailed numbers and calculations. Here's the complete financial plan, Judith said, studying the numbers. They calculated exactly how much they needed to pay their debts, how much they would have left to live on, and even researched the cost of living in different countries. This is chilling. What else is in that envelope? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know. Each revelation was worse than the last, and I felt like I was discovering my daughter was a complete stranger. There are receipts, Judith said, pulling out several small slips of paper. A receipt from a nursery for special ornamental plants, a printed internet search on symptoms of oleander poisoning, and this, she paused, looking at a paper with a shocked expression. It's a search on how to act like a grieving relative to avoid police suspicion. The room was spinning around me. My daughter had not only planned to kill me, but had meticulously researched how to fake her grief over my death. How could she have become this? I murmured, feeling nauseous. At what point did the sweet girl I raised turn into a calculating murderer? I don't know, Karen, Judith answered with brutal honesty. But what I do know is that we have enough evidence to prove this was premeditated. You can no longer have any doubts about what to do. This goes far beyond a mistake or a desperate decision. Judith closed the envelope with all the evidence and looked at me with a determination I had never seen in her. Karen, we need professional help immediately. This is no longer something we can handle on our own. Her voice was firm, but I could detect the fear she was trying to hide. We have to call the police and a lawyer. There's no turning back now. Wait, I said, panicking at the thought of involving the authorities. Can't we try to solve this as a family first? Maybe if I confront Hannah with all this evidence, we can reach some kind of agreement. I knew it sounded ridiculous, but the mother in me still clung to the hope that there was a solution that wouldn't completely destroy my daughter. Judith took me by the shoulders and looked me directly in the eyes. Karen, listen to me very carefully. Your daughter wrote a detailed manual on how to murder you and get away with it. There is no family agreement possible here. This is attempted premeditated murder." Her voice softened, but remained just as firm. "If we don't do something now, the next time, she won't accidentally switch the plates. The next time, she'll make sure there are no mistakes." As Judith's words sank in, something caught my eye on Hannah's desk, a small, worn photo album I hadn't noticed before. I picked it up, flipping through the pages with a growing sense of dread. The album contained photos of another woman older, elegant, with a striking resemblance to me. She appeared in several pictures with Andrew, looking happy and in love. "Judith, look at this," I whispered, my hands trembling. "Who is this woman with Andrew?" Judith examined the photos carefully. "I don't know, but there's writing on the back of this one." She turned over one of the photos. In neat handwriting that wasn't Hannah's, it read, "Anthony and me at the lake house, April 2018. "Anthony," I repeated. "David said Andrew's real name is Anthony Daniels. And look at the date, 2018. That's a year before he met Hannah." Judith noted. We continued flipping through the album. The woman appeared in photos at various locations: a beach house, a mountain cabin, what looked like an expensive restaurant, always with Andrew, or Anthony, as the notes called him. The final photo in the album made my blood run cold. It showed the woman lying in a hospital bed, looking frail and ill. The note on the back simply read, "Elizabeth, 2 weeks before the accident. Rest in peace." "Elizabeth," I murmured. "This must be the wealthy older woman David mentioned, the one who died in an accident and left everything to Andrew." "Karen," Judith said slowly, "I think we found something much worse than we expected. This isn't just about Hannah trying to poison you for money. This is about Andrew having done this before." As we continued searching the room, Judith found something hidden between the mattress and box spring, a leather-bound journal with Hannah's name embossed on the cover. "It's recent," she said, showing me the first page dated just 6 months ago. Unlike the teenage diary we'd found earlier, this journal painted a disturbing picture of Hannah's current life, one filled with fear, manipulation, and gradual loss of control. "Jan 15, Judith read aloud. "Andrew lost $50,000 at the casino last night. When I confronted him, he threw a glass against the wall and said I should be grateful he married me. He said no one else would want me at my age. I'm only 37, but sometimes he makes me feel so worthless." My heart ached reading those words. The Hannah I knew had always been confident, independent. What had happened to that woman? Feb 3, Judith continued. "Andrew brought home a new car today. When I asked how we could afford it when the boutique is struggling, he said not to worry, that he had investments that were about to pay off. But I checked our accounts were overdrawn by $12,000. Entry after entry documented a relationship built on lies, intimidation, and growing debt. But one passage from March stopped us both cold. I found pictures in Andrew's desk drawer today. They show him with another woman older, elegant. Her name is Elizabeth, according to the notes. When I asked Andrew about her, he got very quiet, then said she was his aunt who died and left him some money. But they don't look like aunt and nephew in these photos. They look like lovers. There's something he's not telling me." April 10th, Andrew came home drunk tonight and said something that terrified me. He said sometimes rich old ladies have accidents. It's just nature's way. When I asked what he meant, he laughed it off, but there was something in his eyes that scared me. I'm starting to wonder who my husband really is. The pieces were falling into place, a pattern too disturbing to ignore. May 1st, Andrew says we need to ask Mom for money. When I told him she's careful with investments and would need a solid business plan, he laughed. "We don't need a real plan," he said. "We just need her to think there is one." I feel sick about lying to Mom, but Andrew says it's the only way to pay off his gambling debts. He says the people he owes money to have threatened to hurt us both if he doesn't pay soon. I closed my eyes, absorbing the painful truth. Hannah had been trapped in a web of manipulation and fear. May 15th, Andrew suggested something unthinkable today. He said if Mom won't give us the money, there are other ways to get her estate. When I asked what he meant, he said sometimes nature needs a little help. I told him I would never hurt my mother. He just smiled and said, "You'll change your mind when they come breaking our kneecaps." I'm so scared, I don't know what to do. The final entry, dated just 4 days ago, revealed Hannah's ultimate capitulation. Andrew brought home oleander leaves today. He says they're untraceable once ground up. I can't believe I've agreed to this. What kind of monster have I become? But he says they'll kill us both if we don't pay. Mom will just go to sleep and never wake up. It will look like a heart attack. No one will know. God forgive me. I see no other way out. I sat there, stunned into silence. The journal revealed something I hadn't expected: Hannah's reluctance, her fear, her internal struggle. She was coerced, I whispered. Andrew manipulated her into this. Yes, Judith agreed, but she still made the choice to go through with it. Karen, she still prepared the poison and served it to you with a smile. I know, I admitted. But this changes things. This isn't just about Hannah trying to get my money. This is about Andrew systematically destroying my daughter and using her to commit murder, possibly not for the first time. As we continued searching, Judith discovered something tucked into the back pocket of the journal, a small white stick with 2 pink lines clearly visible. Karen, she said softly, it's a pregnancy test. Hannah is pregnant. The revelation hit me like a physical blow. My daughter was carrying a child, my grandchild, while plotting my death. This complicates everything, Judith said, stating the obvious. Before I could respond, a sound from downstairs froze us both. The front door was opening. Hello, Mom. Are you home? Hannah's voice floated up the stairs, sending a chill down my spine. We need to leave, Judith whispered urgently. Now. We grabbed the evidence, the oleander jar, the lists, the letter, the journal, the pregnancy test, and hurried toward the back stairs that led to the kitchen. Mom, is someone here? I saw Judith's car outside. Hannah's footsteps were coming up the main staircase. We slipped down the back stairs just as we heard her reach the second-floor landing. Karen, this way, Judith whispered, guiding me through the kitchen and out the back door. We hurried across the yard to the side gate, the evidence clutched tightly in our hands. As we pulled away in Judith's car, I saw Hannah standing on the front porch, watching us leave with an expression that chilled me to the bone, not anger or guilt, but cold, calculated determination. She knows we found something, Judith said, accelerating away from the house. She'll be desperate now, I nodded, clutching the envelope containing the proof of my daughter's betrayal. Let's go see that lawyer. Marcus Johnson's office was located in a sleek downtown building, his name etched in gold on a mahogany door. He was a distinguished man in his 60s, with silver hair and keen eyes that seemed to miss nothing. Mrs. Miller, Judith briefly explained the situation to me over the phone, he said as we settled into leather chairs across from his desk. You can tell me everything from the beginning. For the next hour, I recounted the entire story: the request for money, my suspicions, the special dinner, the plate swap, Hannah's confession, and finally all the evidence we had found that morning. Marcus took notes constantly, asking specific questions about dates, times, and details. His expression remained professionally neutral, but I could see the shock in his eyes as the story unfolded. This is very serious, he said when I finished my story. We have physical evidence of the poison, written documents proving premeditation, and a direct confession from the accused. He closed his notepad and looked at me gravely. Mrs. Miller, this constitutes attempted murder in the first degree. Your daughter could face between 15 and 25 years in prison, and based on what you've told me about her husband's possible involvement in a previous death, the authorities may open an investigation into that as well. The lawyer's words hit me like a sledgehammer. 25 years, I repeated, my voice breaking. My daughter could spend the rest of her life in prison. The reality of the legal consequences completely overwhelmed me. Isn't there some way to reduce the charges, some way for this not to completely destroy her life? Marcus looked at me with professional compassion. Ma'am, I understand she is your daughter, but we have to be realistic. The level of planning you describe, the documentary evidence, the fact that she researched specific methods of poisoning, all of this points to a highly premeditated crime. He paused before continuing. However, the fact that you survived could work in her favor in a plea negotiation. And if we can prove that she was coerced or unduly influenced by her husband, that might also help her case. What if I don't press charges? I asked, clinging to any possibility of protecting Hannah. What if I just let her go and never speak of this? I knew it was a desperate question, but I needed to know all my options. Judith intervened before Marcus could answer. Karen, are you listening to yourself? You want to let someone who tried to murder you go free so she can try again. Her voice held a frustration I had never heard directed at me before. And what about the next person Hannah and Andrew decide to rob or hurt when they run out of money? Marcus nodded grimly. Judith is right. Furthermore, legally speaking, now that we have knowledge of a crime, we are obligated to report it. If we don't, we could become accessories after the fact. He looked at me directly. Mrs. Miller, I understand this is devastating, but you have no legal choice here. We have to involve the authorities. What would be the next step? Judith asked, taking control of the situation when she saw I was too overwhelmed to continue. What exactly do we need to do to proceed correctly? First, we need to preserve all the evidence, Marcus explained. We can't touch anything else without gloves. We need the police to come and document the crime scene properly. He took out his cell phone. Second, we need to file a formal report. Third, we need to get a restraining order against Hannah and Andrew to protect Mrs. Miller. The word crime resonated in my mind like a funeral bell. My home had officially become a crime scene. The kitchen where I had cooked thousands of meals for my family was now evidence in an attempted murder case. How long will this whole process take? I asked, feeling my normal life slipping away forever. The legal process could take months, possibly years. Marcus answered honestly. But the immediate protective measures should be in place within the next 24 hours. He looked at me seriously. Mrs. Miller, in the meantime, you cannot be alone. It's too dangerous. Do you have a safe place to stay? She can stay with me for as long as necessary. Judith intervened immediately. My house has a security system, and I live on a busy street. It will be harder for Hannah to try anything there. Her offer filled me with gratitude and relief. Marcus began making the necessary calls. First, he called the police to report the crime and request they come to process the scene. Then, he called the courthouse to begin the process for the restraining order. The police will be here in an hour, he informed us. They'll need to take formal statements from both of you and professionally photograph all the evidence. What's going to happen when they arrest Hannah? I asked, feeling the reality of the situation become more concrete with every step we took. Are they going to show up at her house with sirens and handcuffs? Is it going to be public? Will she be on the news? It depends on how the police proceed, Marcus explained. They might call her to turn herself in voluntarily, or they might go to arrest her directly. Given the level of premeditation, they will likely opt for a direct arrest. He paused. As for the media, we will try to keep this private, but I can't guarantee anything once it goes to court. The idea of the situation becoming public terrified me. People would know that my own daughter tried to kill me. The shame and humiliation added to the pain and betrayal I already felt. They're going to think I'm a terrible mother who raised a murderer, I whispered. Judith came over and hugged me tightly. People are going to see that you are a brave victim who had the courage to do the right thing even when it was the hardest thing in the world. Her voice was firm and comforting. And anyone who judges you for Hannah's actions isn't worth your concern. When the police arrived, everything became surreal. 2 detectives, a woman named Detective Ramirez and a man named Detective Taylor, took control of the situation. They photographed everything, packed the evidence in special bags, and took detailed statements from Judith and me. Mrs. Miller, Detective Ramirez told me after reviewing all the evidence, this is one of the most well-documented cases of attempted homicide I have ever seen. Your daughter and son-in-law are going to face very serious charges. Her tone was professional, but compassionate. I know this must be devastating for you, but you did the right thing by reporting it. As the detectives prepared to leave, I found the courage to mention what we had discovered about Andrew's past. Detectives, there's something else you should know, I said, showing them the photo album with pictures of Elizabeth. We believe my son-in-law may have been involved in another suspicious death before he met my daughter. His real name is Anthony Daniels, not Andrew Thompson. Detective Taylor's expression changed instantly. Anthony Daniels, there was a case in Arizona a few years ago. A wealthy widow named Elizabeth Carrington died in what was ruled an accident. but there were suspicions it might have been foul play. Her husband, who had only been married to her for 18 months, inherited everything and disappeared shortly after. That sounds like him, I confirmed. My accountant discovered Andrew changed his identity 5 years ago after being investigated for fraud. This changes everything, Detective Ramirez said, examining the photos more closely. We need to contact the Arizona authorities immediately. This could be part of a pattern. One more thing, I added hesitantly. My daughter is pregnant. The detectives exchanged glances. We'll make sure that's noted in the report, Detective Ramirez assured me. It may affect how they handle her custody situation if she's arrested. As they left with the evidence, I felt a strange mix of relief and dread. The wheels of justice were now in motion, and there was no turning back. The arrest took place at dawn the next day. Judith and I were having breakfast in her kitchen when my cell phone rang. It was Detective Ramirez. Mrs. Miller, we've just arrested Hannah at her residence. Andrew is still in the hospital under police custody. Her voice was professional, but I could detect a certain satisfaction. Hannah resisted arrest and denied everything initially, but when we showed her the evidence, she broke down completely. My hands shook so much I almost dropped the phone. Knowing my daughter was in a police cell brought a mixture of relief and devastation I didn't know how to process. What happens now? I asked as Judith took my free hand for support. There will be an arraignment this afternoon at 3 Hazoras, the detective explained. You can attend if you wish, but it's not mandatory. She paused before continuing. We also want to inform you that we found more evidence at Hannah's house. She had a whole notebook with detailed plans, including alternative ways to harm you if the poison didn't work. Those words hit me like a fist in the stomach. My daughter had not only planned to poison me, but she had backup plans to murder me in other ways. What kind of alternative plans? I asked, though I wasn't sure I wanted to know the answer. I'd rather not go into detail over the phone, the detective replied diplomatically. But I can tell you this confirms that the poisoning attempt was not a desperate impulse. It was part of a very elaborate plan to obtain your inheritance. She paused again. Mrs. Miller, we also discovered something else you should know. We found evidence that Andrew was planning to eliminate Hannah after you were gone. He had set up a separate bank account in his name only, with instructions to transfer all funds there immediately after your estate was settled. This new revelation stunned me. He was going to kill her too. We can't say for certain, but the evidence suggests he was planning to disappear with all the money, leaving Hannah behind. We found a passport under yet another name and flight information to countries with no extradition treaties with the United States. Does Hannah know this? I asked, feeling an unexpected surge of maternal protectiveness despite everything. Yes, we informed her during questioning. It seemed to change her perspective significantly. She's now offering to testify against Andrew in exchange for consideration in her own case. After I hung up, I sat in silence for several minutes. Judith respected my need to process the information without pressuring me to speak. Finally, I broke the silence. Judith, I think I want to go to the hearing. I need to look her in the eye. I need to hear what she has to say now that she can't lie anymore. Are you sure? Judith asked with concern. It's going to be very difficult emotionally. Seeing Hannah in handcuffs, hearing the formal charges. She moved closer to me. You don't have to torture yourself by witnessing that. You can stay away and let justice take its course. No, I replied with a determination that surprised me. I've spent my whole life protecting her from the consequences of her actions. I was always the mother who fixed her problems, who defended her when she got into trouble, who gave her second chances. I stood up from the table feeling a strange clarity. This time I need to see her face the real consequences of what she did. We arrived at the courthouse 2 hours before the hearing. Marcus met us at the entrance and explained exactly what to expect. Hannah will enter in handcuffs and a prison uniform. The judge will read the formal charges: attempted murder in the first degree, conspiracy to commit murder, and possession of a toxic substance with criminal intent. His voice was serious. Afterward, the defense attorney will ask for bail, and the prosecution will argue that she should remain in custody. Given the nature of the crime and the evidence, I expect the judge will deny bail. When we entered the courtroom, my heart was beating so fast, I thought everyone could hear it. The room was cold and impersonal with wooden benches and fluorescent lights that gave it a somber look. I sat in the front row with Judith beside me and Marcus behind us. When they brought Hannah in, I almost didn't recognize her. Her hair was a mess, her face swollen from crying, and the orange jumpsuit made her look small and vulnerable. But what struck me most were her eyes. When she saw me sitting in the front row, her expression changed from sadness to something I can only describe as shame. Not the hatred I had expected, but a deep, painful recognition of what she had done. "Mom," she muttered as she passed near me, her voice caught in her throat, unable to say more. The judge, an older woman named Judge Peterson, entered and the hearing began. "The state versus Hannah Miller Thompson," the clerk announced. "Charges of attempted murder in the first degree, conspiracy to commit murder, and possession of a toxic substance with criminal intent." When the prosecutor began to read the specific details of the charges, describing how Hannah had planned my death, how she had researched methods of poisoning, how she had written detailed to-do lists, my daughter slumped in her chair. For the first time, she seemed to truly understand the magnitude of what she had done. "How do you plead?" the judge asked, looking directly at Hannah, her defense attorney, a young woman who seemed overwhelmed by the gravity of the case, whispered something in her ear. "Not guilty," Hannah said in a barely audible voice. But as the prosecutor began to present the evidence, the jar of oleander, the letter in her own handwriting, the internet searches her face completely fell apart. "Your Honor," the prosecutor said, "the defendant meticulously planned the murder of her own mother to obtain an inheritance of nearly $3 million. We have physical evidence, documents written by the accused, and a direct confession." He held up the envelope with all the evidence. This was not a crime of passion. It was a calculated murder that failed only by chance. The defense attorney tried to argue for bail, explaining that Hannah was pregnant, had no criminal record, and had been under extreme pressure from her husband's debts. "Furthermore, Your Honor," the defense attorney added, "there is evidence that suggests Ms. Miller Thompson was coerced by her husband, who has a history of manipulation and possibly violence. She acted under duress, fearing for her own safety, but the prosecutor countered that someone capable of planning the murder of her own mother was an extreme danger to society. Furthermore, Your Honor," the prosecutor continued, "we found evidence that the defendant had alternative plans to murder the victim if the poisoning failed. This demonstrates a persistent determination to commit this crime." His words echoed through the courtroom like a death sentence. Throughout this legal exchange, Hannah was staring at me constantly. But it wasn't the look of a defiant criminal. It was the look of someone drowning in the consequences of their own actions, desperately seeking a lifeline they knew they didn't deserve. When the judge finally spoke, her voice filled the room with absolute authority. "Given the premeditated nature of these crimes, the overwhelming evidence presented, and the fact that the victim is the defendant's own mother, I find that the defendant represents an extreme danger to the community." She looked directly at Hannah. "Bail is denied. The defendant will remain in custody until trial." The sound of the judge's gavel echoed like thunder. Hannah completely broke down, sobbing uncontrollably. "Mom!" she cried as the officers led her away. "Mom, please. I'm so sorry." But I remained silent, frozen in my seat. Watching my daughter being led away in handcuffs was one of the most painful moments of my life, but also one of the most necessary. For the first time in 37 years, I didn't run to rescue her from the consequences of her actions. Marcus walked us out of the courthouse. "Now comes the hard part," he explained. "The legal process is going to take months. Hannah's attorney will likely try to negotiate a plea deal to reduce her sentence, especially given her pregnancy." He looked at me with compassion. "Karen, are you prepared for this? Because it's going to get worse before it gets better?" "I'm prepared," I answered, and for the first time in days, I truly believed it. I'm prepared to do what I should have done years ago. Let Hannah face the real consequences of her decisions. The weeks that followed were a blur of legal proceedings, emotional upheaval, and increasingly disturbing revelations. 2 weeks after the arraignment, I received a call from Marcus. "Karen, I need to speak with you about a development in Hannah's case," he said, his tone serious. "Her attorney has approached the district attorney with a plea offer, Hannah is willing to testify against Andrew in exchange for a reduced sentence. What kind of reduced sentence? I asked. She would plead guilty to attempted murder in the second degree, which carries a maximum sentence of 15 years. With her cooperation and considering this as her first offense, she might serve as little as 8 years, with the possibility of parole after 5. I closed my eyes, trying to process what this meant. And what about the baby? That's part of what I wanted to discuss, Marcus continued. Hannah is 4 months pregnant. The child will be born while she's incarcerated. She's asked if you would consider taking custody of the baby. The request stunned me into silence. Hannah wanted me to raise her child after she had tried to kill me. The irony was almost too much to bear. I don't know if I can do that, I admitted finally. How can I look at that child every day and not remember what Hannah did? You don't have to decide right now, Marcus assured me. But I wanted you to know that this is part of what's being discussed. The alternative would be foster care, or possibly Andrew's parents if they're deemed suitable. The thought of my grandchild in foster care created a new ache in my heart. No matter what Hannah had done, the baby was innocent. I need time to think about this, I told Marcus. This isn't a decision I can make lightly. Of course, he replied. There's something else you should know. The authorities in Arizona have reopened the investigation into Elizabeth Carrington's death. They're exhuming her body to test for traces of poison. If they find evidence that Andrew murdered her, he could be facing the death penalty. The news that Andrew might have killed before didn't surprise me, but it added another layer of horror to the situation. My daughter had married a serial killer who had groomed her into becoming his accomplice. Thank you for keeping me informed, I said. Please let me know if there are any more developments. After hanging up, I sat in Judith's garden, watching the butterflies flutter among her rose bushes. How had my life come to this, my only child facing years in prison, my son-in-law potentially a serial killer, and me faced with the impossible decision of whether to raise their child? The next day, I received a letter from Hannah. I sat with it in my hands for hours, unsure whether to open it or throw it away. Finally, with Judith by my side for support, I broke the seal. Dear Mom, it began, I know you probably hate me, and you have every right to. What I did is unforgivable. There are no words that can justify or explain away my actions. I tried to kill you, my own mother who has loved me unconditionally my entire life. There is nothing I can say that will make that right. The handwriting was shaky, the paper stained with what appeared to be tears. I won't make excuses about Andrew or the debts or the threats. Those things were real, but the choice was still mine. I could have come to you for help. I could have gone to the police. I could have done 1,000 other things besides what I did. I had to stop reading for a moment, my own tears blurring the words. I think about that moment when you switched the plates. You knew, didn't you? You saw right through me, like you always have. And instead of confronting me right there, you let the situation play out. You gave me enough rope to hang myself with. It was the most painful lesson I've ever learned, but maybe the most necessary. Hannah's insight surprised me. She was right, I could have confronted her immediately, but some instinct had told me to wait, to gather evidence, to make sure there could be no denials or evasions. I'm writing to tell you that I'm pleading guilty. No trial, no publicity, no dragging this out. I did it, and I need to pay for what I did. My lawyer says with the plea deal and my cooperation against Andrew, I might be out in 5 to 8 years, but even if it's longer, I accept that. For the first time in my life, I'm not looking for an easy way out. The letter continued with details about her pregnancy, her fear of giving birth in prison, and her concerns about the future of her child. I have no right to ask anything of you, Mom, not after what I did, but I'm begging you to consider taking my baby, not for me, but for an innocent child who deserves a chance at a decent life. If you can't do it, I understand. Maybe it's too much to ask that you raise the grandchild of the daughter who tried to kill you. The final paragraph broke what remained of my heart. I don't expect forgiveness. Mom, what I did goes beyond forgiveness. But I want you to know that I am truly, deeply sorry. Not just because I got caught, but because I betrayed the most sacred bond there is, the one between a mother and her child. If I live to be 100, I will never forgive myself for that. With love and infinite regret. Hannah. I folded the letter carefully and placed it back in the envelope. Judith, who had read it over my shoulder, squeezed my hand. "What are you going to do?" she asked softly. "I don't know," I admitted. "About the baby, about Hannah, about any of it. I just don't know." The next 3 months were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, hearings, and increasingly disturbing revelations about Andrew's true nature. Marcus kept me informed of every development in the case, and each new piece of evidence that emerged painted a portrait of Andrew that was even more monstrous than I had imagined. "Karen, I need to talk to you about something we discovered," Marcus said during one of our weekly meetings in his office. His expression was graver than usual, which was saying a lot given the seriousness of the case. "The investigation into Elizabeth Carrington's death has been concluded. The medical examiner found traces of oleander in her exhumed remains, the same poison that Hannah used on you." I froze in my chair. "So Andrew did kill her." "It appears so, and there's more. They've identified 2 other suspicious deaths connected to him under different aliases. Both were wealthy older women who died shortly after becoming romantically involved with him. This confirmed what I had suspected. Andrew was a calculated predator who had been perfecting his technique for years. He used the same method each time," Marcus continued. "He would charm vulnerable women, isolate them from friends and family, then find a way to access their money. When he couldn't get it legally, he would resort to murder." "And Hannah? How does she fit into this pattern?" Marcus hesitated. "That's where things get complicated. Hannah doesn't match his usual victim profile. She wasn't wealthy when they met, and she's much younger than his other targets. So why her?" I asked, though I was beginning to see the answer. "Because of you," Marcus replied. "We believe Hannah was never his primary target. You were, from the beginning. He was after your money. Hannah was just his way to get to it." The realization was both disturbing and strangely relieving. Hannah hadn't sought out a man who would help her murder me. She had been manipulated by a skilled predator who had identified her vulnerabilities and exploited them ruthlessly. "The investigators believe Andrew spotted Hannah at a charity event you hosted 5 years ago. He researched her, learned about your wealth, and deliberately pursued her as a means to get to you." I remembered that charity gala. Clearly it was for the Textile Industry Foundation, and Hannah had helped organize it. I recalled seeing her talking animatedly with a handsome man at the bar, but I had thought nothing of it at the time. "So this was years in the making," I said, feeling sick at the thought of how meticulously Andrew had planned everything. "He spent 5 years working toward my murder." "Yes," Marcus confirmed. "He's what law enforcement calls a black widow killer, except targeting older women instead of men. They're usually very patient, very methodical." The news should have horrified me, but instead, it brought a strange sense of peace. Hannah's betrayal felt somewhat less personal, knowing she had fallen victim to a practiced manipulator who had been planning this for years before she even met him. "What does this mean for Hannah's case?" I asked. "It strengthens her claim that she was coerced and manipulated. The prosecutor is now considering reducing the charges further, possibly to conspiracy rather than attempted murder. She's been extremely cooperative, providing details about Andrew's methods that have helped build the case against him." I nodded, processing this information. "And Andrew, he's facing multiple murder charges across several states. Given the premeditated nature and the number of victims, he's likely looking at life without parole, possibly even the death penalty in Arizona." As I left Marcus's office that day, my mind was spinning with all I had learned. Andrew was a monster who had preyed on vulnerable women for years. Hannah had been both his victim and his accomplice. And I had been the ultimate target all along. That evening, I finally made a decision about Hannah's baby. I called Marcus and asked him to arrange a meeting with my daughter. 2 days later, I found myself sitting in a sterile visitation room at the Women's Detention Center. When Hannah entered, escorted by a guard, I barely recognized her. She was 5 months pregnant now. Her orange jumpsuit stretched over her growing belly. Her face was pale, her eyes hollow, but there was something different about her expression, a clarity that hadn't been there before. "Mom," she said softly, sitting down across from me. "I didn't think you'd come." "I wasn't sure I would either," I admitted. "But I needed to talk to you face to face." For a moment, neither of us spoke. There was too much to say, and yet words seemed inadequate for the chasm between us. "I'll take the baby," I said finally. "When it's born, I'll care for it." Hannah's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you," she whispered. "I know I don't deserve your help after what I did." "I'm not doing it for you," I clarified, my voice steady. "I'm doing it for an innocent child who deserves a chance at a good life." She nodded, wiping away tears. "I understand. I've learned about Andrew's past," I continued. "About Elizabeth Carrington and the others." Hannah's face crumpled. "I had no idea when I married him. I swear. Mom, I didn't know who he really was until it was too late." "When did you find out?" I asked, needing to understand how deep her complicity went. She looked down at her hands. "I started to suspect something was wrong about a year after we were married. He would get these calls that he'd take in private. He'd disappear for days, claiming it was for work. But the boutique's accounts showed no business trips. Then I found the photos of Elizabeth." "Why didn't you leave him then?" "I tried once," she admitted. "He found out I was planning to go stay with my friend Melissa. That night, he hurt me. Not where it would show, but enough that I understood what would happen if I tried to leave again." She pulled up her sleeve, revealing a small, circular burn scar on her inner arm. "He said it was a warning. The next time would be my face." I felt a surge of maternal rage. The thought of someone hurting my child, even a child who had tried to hurt me, awakened something primal in me. "Why didn't you come to me?" I asked, my voice breaking. "I would have helped you. I would have protected you." "I was ashamed," Hannah said, tears streaming down her face. "I had made such a mistake in marrying him, in letting things get so bad. And then there were the debts. He gambled away everything, not just the boutique's money, but loans he took out in my name. I was drowning, and I was too proud to admit I had failed so completely." I could understand that. Hannah had always been fiercely independent, determined to make her own way in the world. Admitting she needed rescue would have been incredibly difficult for her. "When did he first suggest hurting me?" I asked, unable to bring myself to say the word murder. Hannah's face darkened. "It started as hints, comments about how convenient it would be if you left everything to me in your will, questions about your health, your heart. Then, after you refused the loan, he became more explicit. He said we had no other options. The people he owed money to had threatened to hurt us both. He convinced me it was self-defense." She looked up, her eyes filled with self-loathing. "But that's no excuse. I should have gone to the police. I should have done anything except what I did. I will never forgive myself for being so weak, so easily manipulated." "Hannah," I said, choosing my words carefully, "what you did was unforgivable. You betrayed the most fundamental trust between us. But I need you to know that I understand more now about how you got to that point. Andrew is a predator who has done this before. He selected you as a means to get to me. He spent years grooming you for this." She shook her head. "That doesn't absolve me. I still made the choice. I still put that poison in your food." "You're right," I agreed. "And you'll have to live with that for the rest of your life. But knowing what Andrew really is, it helps me make sense of how my daughter could become someone capable of such a thing." For the first time since the poisoning, I reached across the table and took her hand. It was a small gesture, not forgiveness exactly, but an acknowledgement of our shared humanity. "What happens now?" Hannah asked, her voice small. "You'll serve your sentence," I said firmly, "and I'll raise your child. When you get out, we'll see where things stand. I can't promise anything beyond that." She nodded, accepting my terms. "The baby's a girl," she said softly. "I found out last week. A granddaughter." The news settled over me like a warm blanket. Despite everything, life was continuing, creating new possibilities. "Have you thought about a name?" I asked. "I was thinking." "Elizabeth," Hannah replied. Not for Andrew's victim, but for Grandma Beth. Your mother, the mention of my mother, gone 20 years now, brought tears to my eyes. It was a peace offering of sorts, a reminder of our shared history that went deeper than the recent betrayal. Elizabeth is a beautiful name, I agreed. A name with strength and dignity. As our visitation time came to an end, Hannah asked the question I'd been dreading. Will you ever be able to forgive me? Mom, I looked at my daughter, this woman who had brought me both my greatest joys and my deepest pain, and answered honestly, I don't know, Hannah. Forgiveness isn't something I can force. It may come with time, or it may not. But I promise you this, I will love your daughter. I will give her everything she needs to grow into a strong, good person, and I will tell her about the good parts of you, not just the terrible mistake you made. It wasn't the answer she wanted, but it was the truth. As the guard came to take her back to her cell, Hannah stood and placed her hand on her rounded belly. Thank you, Mom, she said. Not for me, but for her. She deserves better than what I can give her right now. I watched her walk away, feeling the weight of all that had happened and all that was still to come. There were no easy answers, no simple resolutions, just the complicated, painful process of rebuilding a life from the ashes of betrayal. The seasons changed, wounds slowly began to heal, and life found new rhythms. Hannah pled guilty to a reduced charge of conspiracy to commit murder and was sentenced to 10 years, with the possibility of parole after 5 for good behavior and her cooperation against Andrew. The public prosecutor had pushed for a harsher sentence, but Hannah's obvious remorse, her cooperation, and her status as a first-time offender had worked in her favor. Andrew's case was a different story entirely. The evidence against him was overwhelming. After authorities exhumed Elizabeth Carrington's body and found traces of oleander, they were able to connect him to 2 other suspicious deaths of wealthy older women in different states. DNA evidence, financial records, and Hannah's testimony created an ironclad case against him. 9 months after the fateful dinner, I found myself in a hospital room, holding my newborn granddaughter for the first time. Elizabeth Karen Miller had been born 2 weeks early but was perfectly healthy, with a shock of dark hair and eyes that seemed to hold more wisdom than any newborn should possess. Hannah had been allowed to hold her daughter for 1 hour before the baby was placed in my custody. The image of Hannah in her prison uniform, cradling her child with a mixture of love and heartbreak, would stay with me forever. It was a moment of pure maternal love marred by the consequences of terrible choices. I had spent months preparing for Elizabeth's arrival, converting my home office into a nursery filled with soft colors and gentle light. Judith had helped me shop for everything a baby needs, from tiny onesies to a state-of-the-art crib with a mobile that played lullabies. Now, as I settled into my new role as a grandmother raising her grandchild, I found unexpected joy in the midst of all the pain. Elizabeth Ellie, as I quickly began calling her, was a bright, curious baby who seemed to find wonder in everything around her. Her smile could light up the darkest corners of my heart, even on days when the weight of all that had happened threatened to overwhelm me. I had sold my textile empire to a corporation that had been interested in buying it for years, getting far more money than I would ever need for the rest of my life. With those funds, I bought a small but beautiful house just 3 blocks from Judith, who had become the sister I never had. Do you regret it? Judith asked me one afternoon as we drank coffee in my new kitchen while Ellie napped peacefully in her bassinet. It was a question she had asked several times over the year, and my answer was always the same. Do you regret reporting Hannah? No, I replied without hesitation, looking out the window at my small garden where I had planted new flowers. I regret failing her as a mother for so many years. I regret not setting boundaries when she was young. I regret not seeing the signs that she was turning into someone capable of this. I took a sip of coffee. But I don't regret stopping her before she hurt more people. Life without Hannah had been surprisingly liberating in some ways. For decades, I had lived with the constant worry of what problem I would have to solve next, what lie I would have to believe, what behavior I would have to excuse. Now, for the first time in years, I slept soundly most nights, secure in the knowledge that the immediate danger had passed. Of course. There were still difficult moments. Every month, I took Ellie to visit Hannah in prison. The visits were bittersweet. Hannah was thriving in the structured environment, participating in therapy and education programs. But the sight of my daughter in prison gray, watching her child grow up from behind bulletproof glass, never ceased to break my heart. Detective Ramirez called me yesterday, I told Judith, recalling the phone conversation. She told me Andrew's trial is finally over. He's been sentenced to life without parole for the murder of Elizabeth Carrington and the 2 other women they connected him to. Good, Judith said firmly. That man deserves to spend every day of the rest of his life behind bars for what he did. I nodded, feeling a strange sense of closure. They found evidence that he had done this at least 5 times over the past decade. 5 women who died because they had the misfortune of crossing paths with a predator. And Hannah would have been the 6th, Judith pointed out. After he got your money through her, she would have been next. I know, I said quietly. In some strange way, I saved her life by refusing that loan. If I had given them the money, he might have eliminated both of us once he had access to it all. Judith reached across the table to squeeze my hand. You're an extraordinary woman. Karen, not many people could have survived what you did and still found the strength to care for your grandchild and visit your daughter in prison. I smiled at her compliment, but the truth was more complicated. Some days I felt strong and resolute. Other days, the grief of all I had lost threatened to consume me. But the presence of little Ellie gave me a purpose, a reason to keep moving forward. During those months, I had also started volunteering at a help center for victims of domestic violence. It turned out that my experience with Hannah and Andrew had given me a unique perspective on how family manipulation can escalate to dangerous levels. It's incredible how many women have similar stories, I remarked to Judith after one of my days at the center. Stories of partners who isolate them, who control their finances, who gradually break down their self-esteem until they can't see a way out. And none of them ever think it will happen to them, Judith added. That's the most frightening part. In my case, it went all the way to attempted murder. But the pattern of manipulation had been there for years with Hannah and Andrew. I just didn't see it until it was almost too late. One afternoon, while organizing some of my belongings I had brought from the old house, I found a box full of family photos. They were pictures of Hannah from a baby to an adult, capturing moments I once considered precious. Judith found me sitting on the floor, surrounded by those memories. What are you going to do with them? She asked gently, sitting beside me. She knew this decision had been weighing on my mind for months. I'm going to keep them all, I said, carefully gathering the photos. Even the ones from recent years. Ellie deserves to know her mother's whole story someday, not just the terrible parts. Are you sure? Judith asked, surprised by my decision. Yes, I replied firmly. When Ellie is old enough, I'll tell her everything. About the wonderful girl her mother was. About the mistakes she made. About the man who manipulated her into doing something unforgivable. It won't be an easy conversation, but she deserves the truth. The ritual of sorting through the photos was surprisingly healing. It allowed me to reconnect with the daughter I had loved for decades before the betrayal. To remember that Hannah wasn't just defined by her worst action. You know what's the saddest part? I asked Judith as we placed the photos in a new album I planned to share with Ellie when she was older. That I'll probably never know the exact moment I lost her. The moment the sweet little girl turned into someone vulnerable to Andrew's manipulation. Maybe it doesn't matter, Judith replied, watching as I carefully labeled each photo with dates and descriptions. What matters is that you stopped her before it was too late, that you found the strength to choose your own life over her manipulation, and that now you're giving Ellie a chance at a better future. 6 months later, I received unexpected news. Marcus called to inform me that Hannah had been attacked in prison by other inmates who had found out she had tried to kill her own mother. She's in the prison hospital, he explained. The injuries aren't life-threatening, but she's in serious condition. Legally, I have to inform you because you are technically still her next of kin. The news affected me more deeply than I expected. Is she asking to see me? I asked, though I already knew what my answer would be. Yes, Marcus admitted. She says she needs to talk to you about something important related to Ellie. I'll go, I said without hesitation, surprising myself with the immediacy of my response. Can you arrange a visit as soon as possible? 2 days later, I found myself back in the prison visitors area. When they brought Hannah in, I gasped involuntarily. Her face was bruised, one arm in a cast, and she moved slowly, clearly in pain. What happened? I asked as she sat down carefully across from me. Some of the other women found out what I did, she explained, her voice hoarse. Trying to kill your mother is considered pretty much the lowest thing you can do, even in here. Despite everything, I felt a surge of protective anger. Did you report it? Are they being punished? Hannah gave a weak smile. That's not how things work in here, Mom, but it's been handled. The guards moved me to a different unit. I'll be okay. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of our complicated history hanging between us. How's Ellie? Hannah asked finally. Is she growing fast? I smiled, grateful for the change of subject. So fast. She's crawling now, getting into everything. She has your smile. Hannah's eyes filled with tears. I miss so much. Her first steps, her first words. I take lots of pictures, I assured her. And videos. She'll know who you are when you get out. Hannah nodded, wiping away tears with her good hand. That's actually what I wanted to talk to you about. I've been accepted into an accelerated rehabilitation program. If I complete it successfully, I could be eligible for early release in 3 years instead of 5. The news was unexpected. That's wonderful. Hannah, what does the program involve? Intensive therapy, education, community service within the prison. It's highly selective. They only take inmates they believe are genuinely committed to changing. She hesitated. But there's something else you should know. I've also been meeting with a victim advocacy group. They work with prisoners who want to make amends for their crimes. It's been eye-opening. For the first time, I'm truly understanding the impact of what I did to you from a perspective beyond my own guilt. I could see a change in Hannah, a depth and maturity that hadn't been there before. Prison, it seemed, was forcing her to confront herself in ways she never had. That's why I asked you to come today, she continued. I wanted to tell you that I'm doing everything possible to become someone Ellie can be proud of when I get out. Not just for her sake, but for my own. I don't want to be the person I was anymore, weak, easily manipulated, willing to hurt others to save myself. Her words touched something deep inside me, a flicker of hope I hadn't allowed myself to feel until now. I believe you, Hannah, I said softly. I see the change in you. There's one more thing, she added, reaching slowly into her pocket and pulling out a folded piece of paper. I wrote this for Ellie. Would you read it to her sometimes? Even though she's too young to understand now, I took the paper, unfolding it carefully. It was a letter written in Hannah's neat handwriting, titled To My Daughter. Dear Ellie, it began. I'm your mom, though by the time you're old enough to understand this letter, you'll have spent more time with your grandmother than with me. That's my fault, not hers. I made terrible choices that mean I can't be with you now, during these precious early years of your life. The letter continued, explaining in simple, age-appropriate terms why Hannah was away, acknowledging her mistakes without graphic details, and expressing her deep love for her daughter. Your grandmother is an amazing woman, stronger and wiser than I ever gave her credit for. Learn from her, listen to her, and know that having her raise you is the greatest gift I could have hoped for, even though I don't deserve it. By the time I finished reading, tears were streaming down my face. The letter was honest, loving, and showed a level of self-awareness I had never seen in Hannah before. I'll read it to her, I promised, carefully refolding the paper. And when she's older, she can read it herself. Hannah smiled through her own tears. Thank you, Mom, for everything. For saving my life that night. For taking care of Ellie. For not giving up on me completely, even after what I did. As our visit came to an end, I found myself doing something I hadn't planned. I reached across the table and took her injured hand in mine. We have a long road ahead of us, Hannah, I said honestly. What you did will always be part of our story. But it doesn't have to be the end of our story. That evening, after returning home and relieving Judith from babysitting duties, I sat in the nursery watching Ellie sleep peacefully in her crib. Her tiny chest rose and fell with each breath, her dark lashes resting against her chubby cheeks, in her innocent face. I could see echoes of Hannah as a baby, of myself as a young woman, of generations of women in our family stretching back through time. Life had taken me on a journey I never could have imagined. From the successful businesswoman I had been, to the victim of my daughter's betrayal, to the guardian of this precious child, each transition had broken and remade me in ways I was still discovering. As I stood to leave the room, something caught my eye on the bookshelf, the photo album I had created for Ellie, filled with images of her mother throughout the years. Beside it sat the letter Hannah had written, waiting for the day when Ellie would be old enough to understand. Our story wasn't simple. It wasn't the happy family tale I had once envisioned. But it was ours, with all its pain and healing, its betrayal and forgiveness, its endings and new beginnings. I gently touched Ellie's soft cheek. "Sleep well, little one," I whispered. "Tomorrow is a new day." And for the first time in a very long time, I truly believed that the future held more light than darkness for all of us. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below